Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. I call to order the Orleans Parish School Board Business Meeting for September 26, 2019. Time now is 5:33. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ashley,
Present.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Ellison,
Here.
Mr. Cleben, Mr. Koppel, Mr. Marshall, Ms. Newell Houston,
Here.
also present Dr. Henderson Lewis Jr. and Sharonda Williams, Board Counsel. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Remind everyone, we have interpretation services are available during today's meeting. I yield to interpreters.
Chào tất cả quý vị, tôi tên là Việt, tôi là thông dịch viên. Nếu quý vị cần thông dịch xin cho tôi biết. Quý vị có thể giơ tay lên và tôi sẽ đến với quý vị. Xin chân thành cảm ơn.
Muy buenas tardes. Si hay alguien que necesita servicios de interpretación al español, por favor levanten la mano, así le podemos proporcionar unos auriculares. Gracias.
Okay. Thank you very much. Everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And let me inform you, the Pledge of Allegiance is being led today by the distinguished gentlemen and ladies of Destiny Club members at Bethune Elementary. We have Cameron O'Neill, Zoe Gibson, Edward Prophet, Corbin Baptiste, and Myron May. Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Yeah. Hold on, before you let them go, we want to thank you all at Bethune Elementary and give them a round, everybody. Thank them for coming. Looking so nice. And please thank your principal for having you all here tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Before we move forward with the agenda, we have one item yield to the superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Brown. Good evening, everyone. Before we get started tonight, I've shared this with several of our board members, but I have something on my heart that I definitely want to share with everyone here today. Over the summer and starting this school year, our district has seen what I feel is an alarming number of high school students victimized by violence. Some of these children tragically did not survive. I'm sure you've read about them, these individuals on the news, but I wanted to call attention to the fact that this is actually a systemic issue that we're dealing with here in our city. Our students are vulnerable and in need of our collective support. Let's start this support with a moment of silence for those students that have lost their lives due to this violence. Thank you. Our hearts go out to the families of each of these individuals and our school community that are impacted by the loss and senseless loss of these young people. Back to you, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Adoption of the agenda. Do we have any additions, deletions, or modifications?
I'd like to point out one clarification on the agenda, Mr. Brown. It's under action item 5.3.
5.3.
Yes, sir. Request for proposal number 20-008. It includes some language that was not a part of the recommended action from the Budget and Finance Committee. In particular, the recommended action as posted on the agenda says the Budget and Finance Committee recommends that the Orleans Parish School Board accepts the proposal from Renew Reinventing Education, Inc. for a value not to exceed the per pupil amount received through the Minimum Foundation Program and any other available funding sources, example, federal IDEA, Medicaid, et cetera, for those students identified with an exceptionality prior to kindergarten. The next language, however, less the cost required of the school district to screen, identify, and evaluate such children as required by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 303.302, and Bessie Bulletin 1706. That phrase was not a part of the recommended action from the Budget and Finance Committee, so I wanted to make that clarification on the agenda. But with that said, I would be asking the board to approve that additional language because it is consistent with the law when that matter comes up for a vote.
Okay, 5.3.
Yes, sir.
Move adoption of the agenda with the changes suggested by General Counsel.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Adoption of minutes.
So moved, waiving the reading.
Second.
We have waiving the reading and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none. We move right into the superintendent's agenda.
I don't believe Mr. Dunhan is here right now. So I'm gonna try to give him a few minutes and we can see where he is from Toyota of New Orleans. But I'll go ahead, Board President Brown, with my other remarks for
Sure.
this evening. So as I begin my report this evening, I would like to start off by actually picking up from last month. If you can recall, last month, after our summer graduation, I talked about an individual that had graduated about 27 years ago and actually was able to receive her high school diploma. And then the next day, there was a young man that reached out to me to actually find out, actually he sent it that night, to find out what was necessary for him to work towards receiving his high school diploma because he felt he was in a similar situation. And so Maria Marcellus, our Director of Legacy Service, was able to reach out to this young man, actually is working with him right now as he works towards also completing his education. So again, to our community, we are saying to each and every one of you that are out there, if you attended school years ago, just like the young lady graduated, should have graduated in 1992, but did not pass the state assessment, and came back and took the assessment. If you are out there and you feel you're in that same situation, please reach out to us at the school district, and we are here to help you finish and get you across the finish line. And so again, that was just one student after I mentioned it last time, and so I just wanted to share with everyone. If you know people in your community, please let them know that we are here. I also like to thank our sponsors at the Audubon Zoo for our second annual Back to School Fest. We almost doubled our number of participants, which was showcased in all of our schools. This day would not have been possible, again, without the Audubon Zoo, Senator Troy Carter, who donated meals to our performing students, Cox Cable and Core Construction, and We Dad Chicken and Shrimp. We thank them for being great partners. I also would like to recognize Gary Brown, who's in our audience, is our Chief Talent and Culture Officer, for her hard work organizing this huge effort, and the 50+ staff volunteers who added this back-to-school event to their plate in addition to their everyday assignment. So let's give our team a round of applause for putting on a very successful event. We also had a series of engagements around our facility planning. Tiffany Delcor is going to speak about this later in the agenda. But in fact, with this engagement, it's really helping us to go to the next level, and which initially was our master planning. Over the last year, our team has worked with the school leaders, school advocates, and other stakeholders to strategize, question, and understand the factors that influence the plan being presented later tonight. We've heard from these groups that is being presented is reflective of those conversations and present a well laid out framework for considering our long-term property needs and a reasonable, surplus strategy. However, we still have a lot of work to do. The facility plan is not our last step, but it's a first step in identifying all of our school facility needs and creating a long-term strategy to fulfill them. I now want to wrap up some of the important school funding items. I came to the board and the public in the month of June to discuss our differentiated funding formula. As a reminder, this formula allows my administration to assign money to school according to specific needs of each student in their building, ensuring that student needs and resources are being met. After conducting outreach to many stakeholders and assessing their feedback, I am prepared to assign the final weights for the formula. I will ask our CFO, Diane Allison, to come forward and present the final weights.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Lewis. As was presented in June, the district worked with schools and other stakeholders to make its recommendations for changes to the district level funding allocation. Since that public presentation in June, we have continued to gather feedback, and tonight we are announcing these recommendations as final. Given that we are making this important final announcement this evening, I wanted to take this opportunity to share several funds disbursements related updates. One. Revenue disbursements. In fiscal year 20, House Bill 393 provided an additional $100 per pupil in school revenues, resulting in an increase of $4.5 million in funding across the district. These dollars are being distributed to schools at this time. Should the board approve a millage roll forward, the increased ad valorem revenue resulting from the increase in property assessments will be distributed as deferred revenue for fiscal 20, likely distributed in January of 2021. And starting in fiscal year 21, the district level funding allocation is adjusted for highly specialized programming as presented in the table on the following page. I will highlight those weights that have been revised. The high school base has gone down slightly. The decrease aligns with the creation at the bottom of the list of a career and technical education weight, which high schools can disproportionately access. The gifted and talented weight has gone up to 0.11. The English language learner weight has been divided into 2 tiers based on language proficiency. We have added a weight of 0.225 for students who have been incarcerated and also for students who have been expelled. We have also added a weight of 0.10 for the career and technical education courses that align with the state weights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allison. In honor of Attendance Awareness Month, NOLA PS has launched a major campaign encouraging students and families to strive for 5. That means strive not to miss more than 5 days of school. We know that missing more than 5 days of school can lead to gaps in learning. We have strategically placed public service announcements all over the city, hoping to reach our students and families and encourage them to prioritize attendance. To that end, we as a district and the community want to incentivize attendance for our students as well. For the last 13 years, we have partnered with Troy Duhan of Toyota of New Orleans as he gives away a brand new car to a senior with perfect attendance. I'd like to call up Mr. Duhan at this time to talk about his program.
Well, for those of y'all who don't know me, I am a product of the state education system. Unfortunately, I was not one of the guys who didn't miss a day of school. But I'm gonna share a real personal story right after Katrina when I really didn't know. I mean, 5 dealerships at the time, they all went underwater, and I was really lost from a direction perspective. And I can remember the state having issues about education, what to do with the federal funds. And I would complain because I was trying to get people to come back, and they would complain, well, the education's so bad, you know. And I remember complaining enough to where my daddy looks at me and says, boy, why are you complaining about something you permit? I'm like, Daddy, what do I have to do about the education system? He goes, son, you are a corporate leader. Businesses, if education doesn't improve, then every business suffers. If education doesn't improve, then crime continues to go up. And I realized at that moment, he's right. I'm complaining about something that maybe I can help. And that was back in 2006. And every year since then, we have given away a brand new car to the high school senior who doesn't miss a day of school. And it's been amazing because I get the emails, I get the Facebook messages, the texts from these kids who end up going off to college. And they would say, man, thank you, because I missed a couple of college days, but I never forgot the moment, Mr. Duhon, you talked about commitment. Because they look at me and they think I'm successful, and I tell them, yes, I missed a couple of days of school, but your life and your success in life and your success in marriage and your success raising your kids is not going to be on your GPA average. It's going to be on your level of commitment. Life is about commitment. And the thing that we try to teach the kids is that you don't have to have a 4.0 to be successful. You just got to show up with the right attitude. And you got to know who you are and not trying to be who society says you are. So I want to thank the school board for allowing us to partner, because, you know, when I'm gone, and those, like my dad would always say, son, you're going to be dead long and gone, and there'll be somebody else's name in those dealerships. And I said, you know what, you're probably right. But this is one thing that when people speak at my funeral, they're going to talk about, because by then I would have given away 50 cars. And what an incredible legacy to live, right? I'm going to live long. I'm going to live long. But what an amazing story, because now you have 28 other states who do this because we started it. And that's just Toyota. There's other brands now, I understand, that are doing it. It actually, one of the dealers got a national segment on Fox and CNN because of this. And truly, as a teacher and as a mother and the parent and the father, the greatest life story we teach our kids is not to make A's. It's just to give it the best you got, but have the right attitude. And when you don't succeed, you don't quit. You just get back up and go at it again. And that's really what we try to teach them. So it's an honor for us, my family, my businesses, to partner, because I'm the guy receiving these texts from these kids. And it's just so touching. So thank you for letting us partner. It means a lot to us. It really does. And hopefully teachers and parents will continue to promote this, because these kids need to understand it is about commitment. It's not GPA. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you again, Ms. You have something to say, Ms. Brown?
Go ahead and finish.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say on behalf of the board, Mr. Duhon, thank you so much. I've been there for the last several years, I think the last 3 years, to see it, and to see the excitement not only on those students but their parents, you know, and the manner in which we build the suspense. As you may recall, I picked the little girl's name 4 times in a row until the car, but I kept saving her every time. You know, it was just a happenstance. But it's so good to see you do this, and I hope that we can get more of our community, our business community, involved in our schools and with our students. And thank you again so much.
And next, we'd like to give the floor to our board vice president, Ms. Ellison, to introduce a new addition that's also going to focus on our awareness for Attendance Month. Ms. Ellison?
So I, too, would like to add a thank you to Mr. Duhon for your commitment to our young people and to this district. So we are truly grateful. We appreciate what you have done over the years in your partnership with Orleans Parish School Board. So as a board member and on behalf of the entire board, we want to say thank you again. And as the superintendent was saying, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown was saying that there are other businesses would grab hold, and we'll get to that. Actually, we have a young man here with State Farm that's also going to partner with us. But the board, each time we've gone to these events, at the end of the day, we're all excited. There's the energy in the room. People want to get in a car, drive the car, sit in the car, get on top of the car, play the radio, do all kind of things. But at the end of the day, when it came down to the business affairs of handling the business affairs of the car and getting them signed up and paying the taxes, et cetera, then a reality check comes in with the parent. The parent is all excited, and then they see this bill here, which they have to pay the taxes on. So the board stepped up to the plate, and my colleagues, all of us stepped up to the plate, and we're going to give the funds needed to cover the cost of those extra things that's needed, so that parent, that student could walk away from the car giveaway in a car free of taxes and being able to, and Mr. Stewart will say what he's going to be bringing to the table as well. So we're excited as a board. I just want to thank my colleagues for stepping up to the plate and giving and being able to support our young people. And they're excited, can't you tell? So next we have Mr. Jonathan Stewart, who from State Farm, and he'll be sharing with us how he's going to partner with our young people as well.
Good evening to the school board members and also to Dr. Lewis, Superintendent. I'll keep my remarks brief, but I want to say being in this building brought back so many memories. I remember the first time I missed school was in the 3rd grade when I had chicken pox. And I attended Paul B. Havens, and I used to walk to this building because my mom was an educator for 38 years that worked here as a social worker. And I can always recall, she's like, Jonathan, you going to school. But the reason I had to go to school because I was riding with her. So, so I've always been a strong supporter of making sure that kids not only go to school, but you show up. And I think Mr. Duhan said it perfectly. It's about showing up. So when the vice chair asked me to be a part of this, without a doubt, no hesitation, I was all on board in supporting it. So we understand that it's a great thing to receive a vehicle for the first time. Paying taxes is one thing, but for the first 6 months, my agency, and I see some of my actual customers in this room today, so on behalf of myself, my agency, and my customers that are here, we will be sponsoring the first 6 months to make sure that that child, when they get that vehicle, and that parent doesn't have to worry about the cost of insurance in Louisiana.
Very good.
So let's, before you leave, we want to take a picture, if you all could come up.
Mr. Duhan?
Mr. Duhan?
Want to stay with them?
Thanks again, Mr. Duhan and Mr. Stewart, for your support and commitment to our community and our students. Lastly tonight, I would like to provide an update on John F. Kennedy High School at Lake Area, as I have prioritized monthly over the past several board meetings because I believe our community deserves to be involved and informed about the status of the students who participated in the graduation at JFK for the 2018-2019 school year and our ongoing oversight of the work being done with current students. Tonight, I would like to share that a final report has been completed by NOLA Public School staff. The report summarizes our review of the incidents that occurred at JFK and subsequent actions taken by our administration in response. This report has also been shared with the State Office of Inspector General and the board president for New Beginning School Foundation. And while our review into this matter is complete given our authority and responsibilities, it should be mentioned the State Inspector General is still, again, conducting its own investigation. In short, based upon the information gathered and reviewed, our investigation into grade change allegation raised in February was ultimately inconclusive. However, a second grade change scheme, which was reported to OPSB in May, is a different story. The second incident resulted in some students who participated in the 2018-2019 graduation at JFK not being certified as high school graduates. These actions taken by JFK officials at this time resulted in the following: graduating seniors not being able to receive diplomas and transcripts in a timely manner, some students being required to take additional courses over the summer, and some students being required to take end-of-course exams during the summer and in an effort to properly certify graduates. Over the course of our review, the OPSB administration decided to seek revocation of New Beginnings Charter, given non-compliance uncovered in our review. Almost simultaneously, the New Beginnings School Foundation Charter Board voted to surrender the charter for both John F. Kennedy High School at Lake Area and Pierre A. Capito Charter School at Avery Alexander, effective at the end of the 2019-2020 school year. This outcome was an appropriate reaction and was accepted due to the fact that the staff who was involved in the non-compliance issue were no longer with the organization. And such a transition at the end of this school year will provide a more stable, long-term transition for the students to a new operator. Additionally, this surrender allowed my team to focus our energies immediately upon the graduation class of 2019 and the students returning for this school year. Although this report summarized the district review of facts, and even though NBSF voted to surrender its charter, there is still an open notice of non-compliance level 2 that is currently being monitored. During the district review of grade-changing allegations, OPSB also became aware of an allegation that the CEO for New Beginnings School Foundation altered minutes for a New Beginnings School Foundation board meeting, which led to a transportation contract being awarded that may not have gone through the appropriate approval process. However, this allegation has not been confirmed to date. In response to this concern, among other actions, our administration now monitors NBSF management and financial reports. We receive copies of all contracts, issues, and payments in excess of $10,000. Any outstanding compliance issues that are part of the open notice of noncompliance will be addressed through our usual charter school accountability framework, which includes assessing, tracking noncompliance notices, sharing those notices publicly at board meetings, and taking appropriate actions. At this time, our focus is twofold with regard to JFK: working to support students within the class of 2019 to resolve any outstanding academic issues, and ensuring current JFK students are set for success. I am happy to report that the new CEO of New Beginnings and current JFK staff have proven to be cooperative and committed to doing what is best for students through this transition, and I applaud their efforts. And I have also assigned my team to the school to offer support and to heavily engage in daily operations at the school, including continual monitoring of student records for accuracy. As far as the class of 2019, I have a detailed update to share regarding those students specifically. Of the 155 students who participated in the graduation at JFK for the 2018-2019 school year, initially only 85 students were eligible to graduate in May. Since then, 52 more students were verified by the Louisiana Department of Education, including summer school completion and waivers approved, for a total now of 137 graduates. That leaves 18 students. 14 of these students are now in various stages. Some students are eligible for a waiver that needs to be submitted by NBSF. Some students are enrolled back in high school. A few students only need the end-of-course exam. Some students were previously enrolled in credit recovery, but the Louisiana Department of Education has identified issues that shall be reviewed and remedied, while a few students are simply still enrolled in credit recovery. Our student support and attendance office is working with some students to understand the student prescription. A prescription is a list of outstanding items needed to graduate from JFK. As for the remaining students, we are urgently and consistently reaching out to them. Our focus is these 18 students and ensuring that they can move forward in their journeys. And I remain committed to supporting the current students at JFK as well as the staff to achieve great things this school year. Working together on behalf of our children is what NOLA Public School is truly about. Moving forward, I fully expect to hear and report positive things about what students and staff will accomplish at JFK this year and beyond. Additionally, I want to share that our accountability team has been engaging with our other high schools across the city and report that what happened at JFK is not, I repeat, is not a widespread problem. It was a JFK problem. We are proud of our high schools and the work they are doing to help prepare our children for college, career, and beyond. This concludes my report. Board President Brown, I return it back to you, sir.
Superintendent, thank you. Moving to action items, I yield to the board council.
We have one presentation before the action items, Mr. Brown.
Okay.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Lewis. Tonight I'm going to present our facilities plan with draft recommendations, as well as an overview of the feedback we've received from our community engagement meetings. But before we really dive into the facilities plan, I want to ground us into the expectations of what this plan is and what it isn't. It is a reflection of engagement from the past year with our school leaders and the community meetings we've recently completed. It is an overview and identifying long-term property needs and a strategy for our surplus properties in order to reprioritize district resources. It is not a relocation of students from our long-term school facilities. An overview of the presentation, we're going to look at our school facilities portfolio and also the lands that we own. We're going to talk a little bit about the school facility preservation program as the long-term and ongoing funding source for our facilities. A scaled down version of the planning data that's been presented at our community meetings, though the full deck and all data is available on our website currently. The draft recommendations as they currently stand, the feedback we've heard from the community, as well as the adoption process moving forward and what our future planning steps are. So just an overview of what our facilities portfolio looks like today. So we received nearly $2 billion from the FEMA Recovery Master Plan, and once that is fully completed, we'll have 31 new school facilities, 14 full renovations, and 29 refurbished facilities. A refurbished facility is a building that received a major investment from the FEMA recovery dollars, but not full renovation. So a system or one or two systems was replaced, a roof, an air conditioning system, the windows, but not full investment. However, we still have 12 facilities that received little to no investment from the recovery program. And though we talk about our facilities, we rarely talk about the district as a major landowner in the city. The school board currently owns 14 lots of land for a total of 114 acres and 5 long-term vacant properties. And as we end the recovery program, and we look forward to the future, the school facilities program is our long-term funding source for facilities moving forward. However, it's for our existing facilities. It is not for future construction needs as we identify them in the future. It is a rededication of sales and property taxes, which today we use for major and emergency repairs, but in the future, in fiscal year 22, will be used for proactive planning for the replacement of school facility systems in a proactive way of replacing and preserving that $2 billion investment. Schools will receive that money based on their per pupil status, so how many students they have in their buildings. If you're in a new or renovated building, you get $500 per student. If you're in a refurbished or other building, you receive $800 per student. So in short, if you received the least from our recovery program, you received the most from our preservation program. So we're going to talk about 3 slides of the planning data that informs the recommendations, the draft recommendations that we're going to present tonight. Again, this is a scaled down version of what's presented. The full planning deck is again available on the website. So the first piece is about facility quality. So we talked about the school facility preservation program being that funding source for our facilities moving forward, but for school facility components or for systems, not for new construction. And so when we think about our buildings that have the lowest quality, we will need new funding sources to replace those buildings with new construction. And when we think about the land we retain and why, we need to retain land for the future new construction we will need to replace the buildings that have the lowest quality. For enrollment, citywide, we have 20% more facility capacity than what we project our enrollment to be in 2025, and that's a great thing. However, when we do a sensitive analysis, we see that's not the case for every neighborhood. And we think about our long-term plan is to make sure we have a great school in every neighborhood. We need to make sure that there are plenty of seats in every neighborhood to support that. So we need to make sure that there is more facility capacity in certain neighborhoods to support the projected enrollment. And that is going to be specifically in New Orleans East, the West Bank, 9th Ward, and in Gentilly. And the last piece of planning data that supports our recommendations is site size and educational adequacy. A school facility should have all of the amenities it needs to ensure that it provides a robust and high-quality education. That means lots of green space, spaces for visual arts, performing arts, and educational spaces for gyms and physical education, and lots of resource spaces. When we looked at all of the space we need to be able to perform those things in the city of New Orleans, and talking with our school leaders, our teachers, and other advocacy groups, we see that that is about 3.5 acres. If we have a 3.5 acre site, we can have the majority of those amenities in the footprint of the building, allow additionally for staff and visitor parking, separate bus and car pickup and drop off, green spaces with play structures, and service deliveries. So that is our minimum, 3.5 acres. When we take a look at our current elementaries and our high schools to see what they have, we see that for 20 of our elementary schools currently, 20 of them are less than 3.5 acres in their site size, and each of them are missing a key amenity. 6 of our high schools are less than 3.5 acres, and 3 of them do not have gyms. So again, when we're looking towards the future and what we retain and why, we need to make sure that land that we're keeping is at least 3.5 acres, and the district should be more aggressive in obtaining land that is near or adjoining our existing sites so that we can expand our current site sizes. All these pieces of data begin to inform and create our decision-making criteria, again, which begin to form our recommendations. And these are our current criteria. 1, that sites are at least 3.5 acres or larger. Again, so when we build schools, they can be all the things we want a school to be. 2nd, that land is in the right area, so we can have the right match of enrollment and facility capacity in every neighborhood. Thirdly, that we don't only want a match of 1-to-1 for enrollment and facility capacity, but we need more facility capacity to serve other purposes, one of them being swing space, making sure that we have alternative temporary locations for when things go wrong. And secondly, incubation space. We need small buildings of high quality so that we can have buildings for the small startup schools that are starting 1 grade at a time, so they can be in a building that helps them sustain their budget while they grow. And again, being more aggressive with purchasing, acquiring adjoining lands near our current buildings. And all of these things will help us divest of the properties we don't need, because currently the school board spends about $350,000 in maintaining our current vacant lands. And lastly, these recommendations do not displace our currently occupied schools. And that leads us to the recommendations. This slide is the first set of recommendations of land the district currently has that we recommend to retain for the future. These are lands that do not have structures, and sites are on this table if the land is in the right area, so the 9th Ward, New Orleans East, the West Bank, or Gentilly, and the land is the right size, being over 3.5 acres. Our second set of recommendations are properties that we should retain for specific swing space and incubation purposes. And on this slide, you will see on the second column the purpose that we're indicating each building be used for. And the 4th column is that facility capacity, how many students that building could reasonably serve. and many of these sites are currently being used for those purposes. O'Perry Walker, for example, is the swing space for Martin Berman Elementary, which is undergoing a renovation. Schwartz has been the incubation location for Elon Academy as they grow a grade by each year. And lastly, this is our recommendations for divestment. Divestment means properties available for school purchase, government exchange, or public auction. Sites are on this list because they are, one, too small, or not to be used for educational purposes, for other reasons, or the facility quality is so low as designated by the facility condition index percentage, which is at on the far right column. And again, all of this information is currently available on our website. A quick overview of what does it mean for the school board to divest of property. First, the board would have to declare property surplus by a vote. Then those properties would have to be appraised for value. And the very first step we would have to take is to offer those properties to charter operators for their first right of refusal. If school operators chose not to purchase those properties, we would have the opportunity to explore governmental exchanges. If no operator is interested and there is no governmental exchange, they could go up for public auction, but any proceeds of these sales must be used for capital improvements or go back into our facilities. The next few slides talk about our community engagement process that has recently concluded. We've held 4 community meetings across the city in the last few weeks. This gives an overview of where we've been and when we've been there. We've also had the data and the draft recommendations available on our website for additional online feedback since September 18th. That will continue to be online until October 4th. There's a web form on that website where people can provide us additional comments and upload additional information. But importantly, what we've heard in those community meetings, and we really heard 2 main themes come out of those community meetings. One is the plan that was presented is not the plan people expected to hear. That this was not a master plan that was presented, and it did not define the long-term capital needs of each building and the cost that it would take to get us to a higher quality. And in that same vein, that this plan did not define what it meant to be in a world-class facility and the cost to ensure all students were in that world-class facility. And we think that those are valid concerns, and in our next slide, we're gonna present a plan of how we hope to get there in the next year. And feedback we heard on those decision-making criteria, so those more weedier details of how those recommendations were formed. For the swing space recommendation, we heard that there was too much swing space on the West Bank. And though that might be a valid point in the short term, we do think that this is not a static recommendation, that every few years we're going to have to revisit this as our facility needs change, as our construction plans potentially and hopefully change over the next few years, that's going to be a fluid and dynamic conversation over the next few years. For site size, that was really in the eye of the beholder. For some people, the 3.5 acres seemed to be too small, potentially for new construction needs. If you lived near one of these schools that is in a smaller than 3.5 acres, you might have the feeling that that school has been able to serve educational purposes just fine in a smaller site size. So we heard differing opinions on that. And lastly, another thing that we heard that I think is also very true is that if the district is going to be more aggressive in purchasing land, we should have a strategy for when we do that and why. So this is the last slide, talking about what it means to adopt a facility plan with some final recommendations and what our next steps are with longer term planning. So the district is reviewing all the community feedback that we've received. I think that this presentation is actually reflective of that already. And we will create a final set of recommendations to present to this board in October. A finalized plan will be available on our website as of October 10th so that the community can see that well in advance. But will be presented to y'all for final consideration on the 17th. And whatever is adopted will also be available on our website. And as we look to our future facility planning next steps, we were already on a path for additional planning as we as we begin to plan for the full implementation of the school facility preservation program. So by the spring of 2020, we commit to define the standards for all facilities as part of the review and revisions of our current design standards, really setting the standard for what it needs to be in a high-quality facility. And as we also are going to release an RFP by the end of October for creating long-term capital plans for our facilities, again, part of that planning needs for the preservation program, we will also ensure that those long-term capital plans take into consideration the cost it would take for every facility to get to that standard. Once we have those revised standards and the capital plans for each building, we will present that information to this board, as well as the upcoming millage renewals that also affect facility funding moving forward. And that completes my presentation.
Mr. President, if I could ask a couple questions.
Question?
Ms. Delcor, on the last slide and the slide before it, you've highlighted in a couple different ways the district's future intention to define the costs of ensuring that every child is in an excellent facility. What seems to be missing, though, is when and how the district's going to define a financing strategy for funding those costs. That's just a clear gap, and I'm not sure if you know the answer yet. But can you articulate the timeline and how that's going to actually occur?
Yeah, I don't think it's a gap. I think it's an operational next step. Before we can identify what the funding need is, how we get to the funding answer, we need to identify and call out what the funding need is. So that's, I think if there was a next bullet, it would be, the next bullet is, now how do we get the funding to achieve that number that we've identified?
Okay, I think maybe that bullet could be added. That'd be helpful if that's the intent.
Got it.
And then secondly, briefly, in the spring, the board considered I believe took action, if I'm not mistaken, on moving forward on an RFP for the usage of vacant land the district intends to retain. And here we have a solid list of facilities that we may not be able to build new construction on currently, but might someday down the road. It would be nice to be able to put those properties into service for the community when and if that's possible. In the meantime, can you give us any update on when the release of that RFP will actually take place?
Yes. Working with legal counsel to define that, it will not be an RFP based on the proposals that we will need, based on how we would have to accept proposals for how we lease land as a governmental entity. So we're looking at either RFIs or invitation to bid. So it won't be an RFP, a request for proposals. So we're debating if it's either an RFI, which would require another step after that. So if you did an RFI, that would just give us information on who wants to do what with our land and for what potential value. That would require an additional procurement step after that, as opposed to moving forward with an invitation to bid to use short-term use of the lands we plan to retain for the future. But that might be difficult without knowing what the intended purposes might be. So we're still kind of evaluating that per one of the conversations we had, because I did identify that there would be another procurement step after a request for information. So we're kind of debating the best strategy for that.
Okay, so is there a timeline yet for the release of the RFI?
There is not, but I will work to get you one.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yep.
That's it? Anything more? Any other presentations? Is that it? Okay, now moving to action item. I yield to Board Counsel.
Action item 5.1, Resolution 13-19, 2019 Revenue Anticipation Notes. The Budget and Finance Committee recommends that the Orleans Parish School Board adopts Resolution 13-19, authorizing the issuance and sale of Anticipation Notes, Series 2019 of the Orleans Parish School Board, State of Louisiana, in a principal amount not to exceed $40 million, making application to the State Bond Commission for consent and authority for such borrowing, and providing for other matters with respect to the foregoing.
Okay.
Move that the board adopts Resolution 1319 and waive the reading of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
We have one comment card, Lona Hankins. I'll just remind everybody you have 2 minutes. If you can state your name and address and direct your comments to the item that's before the board.
Lona Edwards Hankins, 3704 Magazine Street. As you move to pursue a cash flow issue and the revenue anticipation, I'd ask that you also really strongly take a look at how you budget. For capital projects, it needs to be plugged into your cash flow so that you know exactly how much you need. You may approve a budget for $2 million to execute a particular project, but you still need to approve that cash in the budget year you anticipate expending it. And that is not what has been occurring. Additionally, with your strategic preservation funds, as you move to start doing, I think in the facilities committee, there were about 4 projects that were roughly about $500,000 where you were trying to tackle some problems at certain schools. I think those should be also programmed in to the budget because of the cash flow. Typically, a construction project takes about 3 years. So the first year you spend engineering fees, which are low, and then you move into the construction, and that's when you spend the bulk of the dollars. If you don't have a true cash flow projection, then you will have a problem in taking out either too much or too little amount in this bond revenue. So if in the future y'all can fix the way you do your budget, that'd be great.
That was the last card on that one.
I'd like to take a point of privilege for just a minute.
Sure.
I'd like to personally thank Ms. Hankins for coming out to 3 of the 4 facility meetings and adding her voice to many of the issues. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank her. It was heartwarming to have people come out and really invest their time and energy into helping us do this valuable work. Thank you very much, Ms. Hankins. And the one thing that I take from that is that we really need to move with a sense of urgency, that our kids can't wait. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Any more cards? No other cards? Roll call.
Mr. Ashley? Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Ellison? Mr. Cleben? Mr. Koppel?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Ms. Newell Houston?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Action item 5.2, Resolution 14-19, Corporate Resolution Granting Signatory Authority. The Budget and Finance Committee recommends that the Orleans Parish School Board grants Eric Sealing authority to execute the Louisiana Department of Treasury unclaimed property claim forms submitted on behalf of the Orleans Parish School Board for claim numbers 6061456, 6061460, 6061462, and 6061464.
We have a motion.
A second and waive the reading.
Second with waiving reading.
Lona Hankins.
Lona Hankins, 3704 Magazine Street. Again, I'm concerned that you guys don't have the appropriate controls in place, that when someone exits, they have done everything they need to do as it relates to either communicating what was opened or signing all the appropriate paperwork. I mean, it's kind of silly that you got to go back to somebody and say, hey, I need you to come back and sign this piece of paper after they have left. Perhaps it's due to consistent turnovers that you guys have had. Perhaps it's due to like the working conditions and the morale of the place. But I think there's a problem, a deeper problem that needs to be dug into.
That's the only card.
No other cards. Roll call.
Before we move on.
Yes, go ahead, Ms.
Perhaps legal counsel can explain, since there was a public statement made in reference to why we're using, she was not here for the committee meeting, so I think just to give an explanation of why we have to get a former employee's signature based upon the state and not based upon an employee leaving. So if you could just brief.
I'm going to let Ms. Allison address
Okay.
that.
Okay, great.
Yes, it's a long process to start to be paid for the unclaimed property at the state level. And we started the process when Mr. Sealing was here. We were not able to finish that process by the time that he ended. And that's why the last part of the process we were not able to complete before he.
And the state would not allow us to switch employees?
No, ma'am. If
Correct.
we would have started, if we wanted to change to another name, we would have had to start that process all over again.
Correct.
And there's about $100,000 in unclaimed funds
Thank you.
that the state is holding for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison.
Roll call?
Mr. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Ellison? Mr. Cleben? Mr. Koppel?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Ms. Newell Houston?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Action item 5.3, request for proposal number 20-08. It is recommended that the Orleans Parish School Board accepts the proposal from Renew Reinventing Education, Inc. for a value not to exceed the per pupil amount received through the Minimum Foundation Program and any other available funding sources, for example, federal IDEA, Medicaid, et cetera, for those students identified with an exceptionality prior to kindergarten, less the cost required of the school district to screen, identify, and evaluate such children as required by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 303.302, and Bessie Bulletin 1706, and authorizes General Counsel to prepare a contract for signatures of the board president and Renew Reinventing Education, Inc.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
And we have two cards, Dr. James Ewers.
Good evening. I reside at 9751 Andover Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana. First off, let me congratulate the city on the Intervention Services Initiative. I think this is another step forward for our children. I am a former public school teacher, and I taught high school history and government in Washington, D.C. I was also a senior class advisor and a coach, and was fortunate enough to become a teacher of the year at that high school. I'm a graduate of a historically black college and university in North Carolina. Currently, in this school system and other urban school systems across America, there's a dearth of African American males teaching in these school systems. And there are over 100 historically black colleges and universities in the United States of America. And what I am here tonight to propose is to have the Orleans Parish School Board formally partner with those HBCUs that have teacher education programs, that there be a formal engagement that will allow a team of designated people to go to these schools to recruit them. I would also like to strongly recommend, ladies and gentlemen, that the Orleans Parish School Board partner with the business community such that they could have incentives that would draw and attract young men of color to come to New Orleans to teach. Because I believe that there is power in having African American men in these classrooms working with our young people. So I would humbly and politely but courageously ask you to put this high atop your agenda so that the class of 2020 in these HBCUs can see us going into their colleges and universities and actually recruiting them, partnering with the business community such that they could come to New Orleans and be a part of this school system. Thank you very much for the time. I'm appreciative.
Next, Lona Hankins.
I'm also a proud graduate of HBCU. I'm very concerned and I have a couple of questions about this RFP that you're, or the contract you're about to award. And I don't know if you can answer them today but I really would like for someone to get back to me on the answers. And my questions are, does the early childhood population figure into the 15% calculation that you have on the cap calculation you have for CMOs. And was there an evaluation of this particular program's K through 12 program? It's my understanding they have several schools up for renewal in not this year, but the following year, and those schools are really struggling. So I worry that you are spreading this CMO too far, that they're focused on early childhood and focused on K through 12, and it may be diluting where they should be focused. Like they don't know what they want to be when they grow up, and I think they probably need to pick and choose.
That's the last card.
For the cards, okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries.
Action item 5.4, request for proposal number 20-0007. The Budget and Finance Committee recommends that the Orleans Parish School Board accepts the proposal from the Learning Collective for Types 1 and 3 Charter Application Review in the amount not to exceed $108,890 and authorize General Counsel to prepare the contract for signatures of the Board President and the Learning Collective.
So moved.
Give a motion and a second.
Lona Hankins, we have one card.
Again, in watching the committee meeting, it was stated that you only had one bidder, and I worry about the cost reasonableness of this contract. And yes, it may be lower than the prior contract that you had in place, but we don't know if it's cost efficient for today. The prior contract you had in place may have been 3 or 4 years ago, and so it's at that rate, and we know prices may have come down, we don't know that. The additional thing that I really worry I'm concerned about is, like, why did you only get one respondent? Is there a change in culture happening here? Is there too much pressure put on the people who are evaluating these to go with the in crowd, or just what's really happening in the evaluation of these charter contracts?
That's the only card.
Do you have a motion?
I have a comment.
Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, I want to just be very, very clear. When we use our third parties to evaluate our contracts, they come in and they do their own evaluation, but my administration, we also do a evaluation. I just want to respond to that comment because that was very, very inappropriate. I want to be very, very clear. We have an independent third party that evaluates in my administration, and then based on that information, a final decision is made, and that's what I presented at this before our full board. Thank you.
Thank you for clarification. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
I'm opposed.
Me too.
You have opposition?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. President, if I could just briefly restate the reason I gave in committee for my no vote. I share the concern around that there only being one bidder for this contract, as well as the one before that. The one before that's an essential city service, and clearly we are where we are with that, but that probably needs to change as well. But I do believe the board should provide more scrutiny over these procurement processes that are resulting in very little or no competition. It's just not a healthy practice.
Okay. Moving on. I think that was 5.4, was it?
Yes, we're
Okay.
now at action item 5.5, ratification of fully integrated contract for claims administration services. The Budget and Finance Committee recommends that the Orleans Parish School Board ratifies the fully integrated contract for claims administration services between the OPSB and Hammerman and Gaynor, Inc.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second.
We have one card, Lona Hankins.
I wonder how many of these past workman's comp claims are due to hazards that may have existed in the buildings. Hearing loss, teachers having problems with vocal cords for screaming over noisy HVAC systems, asthma, sarcoidosis that may be due to inhaling dust particles that may be hazard, falling caused due to injuries due to the vast amount of moisture and termite problems that exist in the buildings. There were floors that I walked in after Katrina that were very, very squishy. And so I wonder how many of these are still remnants of that. And because we are delaying a real master plan, that we are exacerbating that problem, because many of these buildings have received very little dollars, and several of them were shuttered pre-Katrina because of lack of maintenance, and they were not habitable or deemed habitable for children. Yet, post-Katrina, we've put little money in them, and they still house children.
Excuse me, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
With your service with the RSD, how many of these buildings are we talking about?
The buildings that are refurbed and the buildings that, she had a slide up there to count of the buildings that are refurbed, and she had a count of the buildings that had minimal investments. It would be probably all of those buildings that are of concern. Do they have a health hazard in them immediately today? I can't say that. I hadn't been in the buildings forever, but I am very concerned about the conditions of those buildings for the people who are occupying the buildings.
Okay, we share your concern, and we got the buildings back in June of 2018. I think the RSD had them before. What was the RSD's position on those buildings at that time?
So if you're asking the RSD's position, like I said in the public meeting the other night, in 2008, it was known that there was not enough money to do everything. When this board voted on the plan in 2008, it was known. When this board voted on the plan in 2012, the RSD did not have the capacity to go out for bonds. The Orleans Parish School Board owns the buildings. So did the RSD do what they could with the buildings? Absolutely. That's why you had 33 buildings that were refurbed, and they have gentle touches. We knew, we communicated, there was not enough money to do everything.
So the boards in 2008 and 2012, you're saying did not do what they needed to do?
I'm saying they knew that this day would come. You knew this day would come when unification happened. Some of you ran on this in 2016.
In 2018.
Yes, it was part of the, if you go back and read the 2017 unification plan, it specifically says develop a plan for facilities.
Thank you very much.
Any other cards? Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries.
Action item 5.6, donation from Senator Troy Carter. The Budget and Finance Committee recommends that the Orleans Parish School Board accepts the $500 donation from Senator Troy Carter in support of NOLA Public Schools' annual Back to School Festival.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second.
One card, Lona Hankins.
It's great that there's a level of transparency that requires you to vote to accept this donation. I'm wondering how many other donations you would get if you would just open up and be a little bit more transparent. This past committee meeting, you on first reading read a board policy, but there's no mechanism for folks, regular folks, to comment on that board policy. I don't see it posted as a notice on your boards. I don't see, you didn't take any comments on it today. Yet in that policy, you guys are wanting to restrict public comment to 30 minutes on a particular agenda item. I have never seen that happen at the City Council, at the City Planning Commission, and I just feel like that is taking us down a risky slope on democracy, particularly since you guys don't hold community meetings where your constituents are really accessible. At least I have never seen it. Constituencies are really accessible to you. Yes, you're out and about at events, but are you holding specific meetings so that your constituency can come out and say what issues they are having with these schools? Thank you.
Any other cards?
That's it.
Okay, roll call. I think it requires roll call.
No, it's just a.
It's only a donation, Mr. Brown.
Okay, we have a roll call note here. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. 5.7.
5.7, donation of Warren Easton Athletic Building. The Property Committee recommends that the board accept the donation of the Warren Easton Athletic Building completed in March of 2019.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Comment card, Lona Hankins.
I want to congratulate the Warren Easton community for raising almost $750,000 for what they, and put it to use where they felt that was an extra for their children. Not all type 3s, it appears that there may be some equity issues with how you are handling it through your lease, your type B leases. Specific charter that comes to mind is Audubon. And when I think about Audubon, I think about in 2008 when Audubon was in the Carrollton Courthouse and that building was put on the land bank list and folks said, nope, don't worry about it, you will have a home. And then because the roof or something was too expensive at Audubon, you moved them to Max 7. And we said, okay, you put some money in Max 7 and now Max 7 requires some more money and you're exchanging it. Now you're moving them to Banneker. But when you're moving them to Banneker, you're telling them, oh, you're on your own. You got to fundraise. You got to pay for any improvements in the building. And then what I heard the other night is in a couple of years, that type of lease goes away. So parents are raising money for a physical infrastructure for short term. They're not even going to be able to see their return on investment come to fruition because they're having to raise money to repair that building when that money could be raised for programming that they feel is more important to their children. Additionally, the type B lease you entered into Gentilly Terrace, you need that physical building for demographic purposes. So, you know, without that building in place, you would be short of kids in your demographic, but yet you're requiring them to have a type B lease. So I strongly urge you to relook at your type B lease policy, particularly since it's going to expire. You guys are saying we're going to do away with it in a couple of years.
That's
Other
it.
cards?
That's it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Think we now
No
have...
executive session.
We now have 6:44. May I have a motion to move into executive session?
So move.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Moving into executive session. There was a motion, second, and a vote in favor to reconsider 5.4. And 5.4 was passed by a vote of 6-1. Thank you. Meeting was adjourned at 6:50. Thank you. Have a good day.